So tonight I thought we could talk about self-love. Right? It seems like for a lot of people, there's a great deal of time and energy spent in trying to feel good about ourselves. Right? But it's an odd thing to talk about, this idea of loving oneself. It sort of raises the question of who are we actually talking about? If we're talking about loving ourselves, it implies two selves, right? The one that's loving and the other one that is attempting to be worthy of that love. Right? So which is the real one? You know, is it both of those, or one of those, or neither? You know, for such a everyday, common concept like self-love is, as soon as you start thinking about that whole mental process of loving oneself, it can get it can boggle the mind pretty quickly. So the natural movement is to wish ourselves well, right? It seems totally natural thing to do. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you wish yourself well? And we imagine ourselves to be sort of autonomous, independent organisms with a continuity of a lifetime, and we want to feel good about that, right? So it's a natural process, this process of sort of self-assessment. How am I doing? How am I doing, over a course of a lifetime? How is this day going? Whatever our time frame is. But there's for many of us, there's this self-assessment process that's happening. And if there's different strategies to sort of satisfy this very natural desire to wish ourselves well as this apparent separate organism, right? So some people might find pleasure just in body sensations, eat, drink, and be merry, feel good, just that's one avenue. Other people might find a level of satisfaction through their career or through intellectual curiosity, philosophizing, trying to piece everything together to come up with a structure, a thought empire that we can feel good about. I mean, other people, seek safety and familiarity, and sort of protect that space in order to feel good about themselves. Other people, feel more enjoyment from relationships, outgoing, providing a service to others. I mean, so there's many different strategies just on an everyday level. And to some degree, our success in pursuing those strategies can result in whether we feel good about ourselves or not, right? How am I doing? I'm pursuing a sense of well-being in this direction. Do I feel fulfilled? Is it working? And some things can work for a while, maybe a long while, and at some point they may not, right? And then we change course and look for something else. So this question of sort of seeking circumstances in order to feel a sense of fulfillment for this organism, like I'm living life fully, making, I'm not wasting my time here, whatever my standards might be. But the question is, where did those standards come from? you know, who decided that your particular source of fulfillment is in, let's say, relationships rather than a career, or family rather than intellectual pursuits, or just seeking the safety of wealth, or whatever the strategy is. Where was that strategy adopted? Was it your choice, or did it just somehow arise out of prior conditioning, that we just fell into that pattern and believed for whatever reason that that would be the source of fulfillment in this lifetime? If I can pursue that particular avenue, and it turns out reasonably well, then I'll feel good about myself. I'll like myself. Right? But the question is, how did that avenue get selected, and how high the bar got set? I mean, how successful did your career have to be in order to feel good about it? Who set the height of that bar? Was that something that was done consciously, or was there always a sense that, whatever level I've achieved, I needed to achieve more in order to feel good about myself? And then there's just that happenstance quality about life itself, whether life will, serve up those circumstances that, we feel are necessary to feel fulfilled. Like, life is cooperating, giving me what I want. And I want that. I want to sort of gain that sense of fulfillment in that particular area. So what? So I can feel good about myself, right? So we come back to the sense of liking oneself. If we raise the bar a little higher, we can say, loving ourselves. And maybe if we've pursued any of these avenues in life intensively enough, we might have the good fortune to discover that any of these avenues are not a source of ultimate fulfillment. They can be enjoyable. There can be many of life's lessons learned by living life in this way, seeking outwardly, but you may find that they're not ultimately satisfying. And maybe at that point we just hear about spirituality and decide, there's the ticket, maybe that's the avenue that will sort of put everything to rest. Allow me to feel fulfilled, complete, at home in this life, at home in this existence, at peace, happy, those kind of things. So we get into spirituality, and then we might find a similar movement happening in spirituality as well, where we're still self-assessing. We're thinking, well, how was my meditation? Was it good today? Was it as good as last week? Is it improving? Do I have a busy mind? Should my mind be less busy? Is someone else doing it better than me? Have I had this, as brilliant spiritual experiences as someone else that talks about it. You know, am I on the path? Am I lost? Am I getting there? Am I getting closer? Am I just out to lunch? Is this real? So even in this arena, we can still engage in these same sort of self-assessment processes that we do in, say, ordinary life, where we're just sort of judging, you know, how well am I doing? How am I feeling today? You know, and we never know how to sort of resolve that, right? You know, you know, do I have to feel better and better every day? Am I judging myself on what I did today, how it felt, how my life felt today, or just how everything in my entire life felt up to this point? You know, is it just a total sum of everything that went before? Is that how I'm judging myself? Or am I judging myself on my current state? You know, or is it, are we holding out the hope that, you know, there will be one revelation, one experience that'll be so incredibly mind-blowing, brilliant, that it'll be a one and done experience, you know, that one experience will resolve everything for the rest of my life? And who is the judge? Do I get to judge myself? Or do I delegate that, relegate that to somebody else? God, perhaps. You know, do we know the answers to these questions? Actually know the answers, not believe this concept or that concept. And if we don't know, it's actually okay. It's good to acknowledge to ourselves when we don't know. But what can be helpful to remember is that the awareness that we pointed to at the beginning is present for all our mental gymnastics, all our anxiety, all our hopes, all our self-assessments, all our, you know, all our self-blame, all our self-criticism. All of that mental activity happens within the field of awareness. So we can take this awareness as a personal awareness, in other words, personally generated from this brain, something local, something separate. This awareness is separate from your awareness is separate from every other awareness. Possibility, right? That's what we've all been taught. The other possibility is that awareness is one awareness, the universal awareness, just the that capacity that this one life has that can be felt and expressed through all of us. One awareness expressed through many forms. So that's the other possibility. That's the possibility that's been pointed to by many, many, profound, realized people over the centuries in many traditions from many different places. So not that that's sufficient evidence to just believe it, that doesn't really help. But what does help is to at least take it as a possibility. Like, I wonder if that's actually true, that the awareness that's seems to be present here, that I can sense into, because it's what's already happening, is the one awareness. It's expressed through all of this personal conditioning, of course, but the awareness itself is from an origin beyond this body, this separate body-mind. So if we just allow that as a possibility, then we have an openness, a receptivity to actually consider that. And this awareness has certain attributes, right? Doesn't really have the attributes, but there's that sense of it as it moves, you could say through us, has an attribute of being non-judgmental, just present, right? Present for whatever arises. The mind may be judging us, but the awareness itself is not. The awareness also is not making any demands on us. It's not insisting. Doesn't have to. Doesn't have to, because it is comes from source. Doesn't have to insist. It is present. It is always present. There's an aliveness to it. So a lot of these attributes we take to be what enlightenment itself is, but we're not actually talking about two things. The awareness itself is the recognition of that awareness is what self-realization is. The recognition that that is what we essentially are, not as a concept, but as a direct, full body realization that that's actually fundamentally what we are. And it's, we can recognize it that it isn't actually an attainment. We can recognize it as a pre-existing condition. That's what's so surprising about it. If it was an attainment, everybody would say, yeah, I sort of worked my way there and I finally got there. It's not like that. It's like we seek and search and look and try and explore, and what we finally discover is that it was there all along. That's the surprising part of it. So we, as a separate self, we've been told in spirituality that it's good to be selfless, right? To somehow rid ourselves of this self-assessing, judgmental evaluation that we often fall into. And we go about trying to do that, and we don't succeed. We don't succeed because we're fighting with a concept, an illusory concept. The illusory concept is this sense of separate self, the sense of separate self is this conglomeration of ideas and mental activity of this self-seeking process, of this self-reflective process where everything is viewed from the perspective of a separate self. I mean, is that not what we commonly do? You know, everything that happens, everything that the world presents itself with, every person that we encounter, there's a tendency to look at that from my perspective. You know, how will it affect my life? Is this something that's pleasant to me or not? You know, is this a meaningful encounter or not? You know, so it's always in terms of referencing back to this personal self. And we can say, no, actually, you know, many times I'm acting altruistically, right? You know, I'm being generous, I'm helping other people. But, and there may be some truth in that, but also if we look deeply, we can see at least a strong hint of feeling good about ourselves for being altruistic, right? So it can be, even while we're in the process of helping other people, being of service, we can feel like, yes, I am a person who helps other people. I am a person being of service. So we can just note that tendency to for this separate self-entity to use whatever arises for its own benefit. You know? So, I mean, we can just see that. We can just see that tendency. So this personal self, you know, trying to get rid of the sense of self, you know, this ego, trying to get rid of this ego, will fail, right? Because ego is comprised entirely of our belief in being apart from the world, you know, being in resistance to what's happening. When we're not in resistance to what's happening, the ego is not really, you know, in the forefront. It arises with force when, you know, we find ourselves in resistance to what's happening. You know, we get angry, we get jealous, we get envious, we blame, you know, those kind of emotions, you know, pull us into a sense of ego, like I know what's right, I know what should be happening. And so when we're opposed to life, ego is in full bloom. Yeah. And you know, we can say, well, you know, I have certain standards, you know, I want things to go the way I think they should go. I have opinions, and they're my opinions, therefore they're correct. You know, so we can you know, try to coerce life to come more in my direction. You know, so what? So I can feel better, right? But that all ends in failure. That's actually where it's actually the source of pain. You know, that insistence that life show up the way I want it to. You know, the alternative is to go in the direction of life rather than insisting life come in my direction, is to allow ourselves to just be in alignment with whatever arises. Doesn't mean that we don't act on it or, you know, say something or do something, but we don't object to whatever it is that is arising. We don't say that it shouldn't happen, it's wrong, that shouldn't be. It is. Therefore, it's exactly what is happening. So when we allow ourselves to just move more in alignment with life rather than insisting life move in alignment with what I want, ego tends to be diminished. We've sort of removed the fuel that generates those egoic thoughts, which is resistance. Resistance to what is, creates ego, and then we suffer. So we're just reversing that process by just allowing life to unfold as it falls, as it will, right? We think we're giving up some great valuable treasure, right? I'm giving up my insistence that life be as I think it should be, giving up a sense of self-control. When we look back on our life, long term, we can see how little control we actually had in how our own life unfolded. I mean, did anyone's life really unfold as we had planned or expected? And if it did to a certain extent, how much of that movement came out of prior life conditioning, prior life opportunities that were just happenstance, that weren't really of our creation? And life unfolding. Right? We still have to get out of bed in the morning, we still have to participate, but when we're not opposed to life, it has a flow to it. So this little self, this little me, this separate self, trying to love itself is doomed. It can't do it. It'll try, of course, but it's just not capable of doing that. And the reason is that it exists in resistance. It exists in the sense of being separate. So the idea of fully and unconditionally loving our own self, our own lives, the way that has unfolded, it won't happen, right? So there's this sense of there being just within us, within this body-mind, a judge, a prosecutor, and a defendant. Right? And we get to play all of those roles. And there's also a sense of something directing that whole drama. And that's what we get to live out. But that whole movement, it's just a flawed paradigm. The whole concept of there's some aspect of myself that is qualified and capable and entitled to judge some other aspect of myself. And we think that's somehow useful. And there's almost a fear like, well, if I gave that up, who would I be? Why would I do anything? If I didn't set goals, standards for myself, nothing would happen. Right? As if, playing with carrots and sticks will actually improve life for me. The sense of reward and punishment. Somehow I'm doing myself a favor by subjecting myself to this lifelong game of reward and punishment. And if I meet some certain standard, which I have created for myself, then and only then will I love myself. But I mean, if we can see that this entire strategy is self-inflicted, it's not necessary at all. It's just the mind talking to itself. One thought talking to another thought. One self-righteous thought condemning another thought. And that movement is ego. Ego doesn't exist otherwise, doesn't exist outside of the world of thought. It's not an entity in there somewhere. It's just this rapidly moving set of thoughts that keeps the sense of it alive. But even while that is happening, there is awareness that is fully present. And that awareness doesn't need to be improved upon. It's complete in itself. It's just patiently waiting for our recognition of it. So the doorway is really to slow down enough, just to allow this mental movement to just slow down enough, just by stopping, sort of withdrawing the fuel from it. The fuel is our fascination with it. That's what it is. We're curious. We want to figure it out. We want to get to the point where we feel complete, happy. We're determined. We're going to make it work. And we've only got this short lifetime to do it, and time's running out, so we've got to press on. But that movement itself is what maintains it. And in the meantime, underlying all of that is this awareness. And sometimes we can even glimpse this awareness and dismiss it. Like, yeah, okay, awareness. Not that interesting. But sometimes the first glimpse can be life-shattering, other times we can just dismiss it, just brush it away. It's not that all of us haven't seen it many, many times, but for most of us, we've dismissed it many times. Like, of course there's awareness. What I'm interested in is something exciting, interesting, fun, sparkly. Awareness just seems common. But awareness is the doorway. Awareness is awareness moving in the world. When we move in the world from awareness, it looks like love. It feels like love. I'm not talking about romantic love here, I'm just talking about a deep sense of oneness, openness, receptivity, connection. When that movement returns to itself, it's resting as awareness. Those two aren't different, love and awareness. They can be spoken of differently, but they're actually the same. They come from the same source. So when we look inside at that depth through awareness, we look into that depth, there's a sense of gratitude, just for the sense of aliveness. There's awe for the total improbability of any of this existing. There's a sense of singularity, oneness, one source. And there can be just a sense of love for the divine, love for existence itself, the source of all, right? That's when we look inwardly, deeply. When that movement is more outward into the world, it's more with a sense of wonder for all of these amazing, incredible manifestations of this one totally improbable existence. There's a movement of generosity. There's a movement of compassion out of recognition of this one existence. That movement. So the self-love that we all seek at some level, just fulfillment, happiness, to try to do it from our personal self, is a flawed paradigm. It doesn't happen like that. The little me is just incapable of unconditional love because it's not unconditioned, it's thoroughly conditioned. It's thoroughly conditioned to want what it wants. The only source of unconditional love is source as it is expressed through awareness. Awareness is unconditioned. Awareness is that openness, that receptivity. That could be called love. The separate self just simply isn't capable of it. It can try, of course it does try, but it always qualifies it. It's never that total acceptance. If it is that total acceptance, it's a movement beyond ego. It's a movement that comes from beyond ego. Ramana Maharshi talks about what could be called source, but he calls it self with a big S. And I think there's some valid reason for that particular choice of words, because as we sense into what we truly are, that intimate sense of presence, of beingness, it feels like self, right? But when we really sense into it, it's not a personal self, it's on a little less self. It's much bigger than that. Because it is that one awareness. When that recognition is there, it feels vast. Still intimate, totally intimate, not distant in any way, but vast. And the use of that term sort of prevents us from imagining a separate entity, separate from us, removed from us. That's not self. It's a very interesting use of that term, self with a capital S. But that's what's being pointed to what we are essentially, what we always have been, what we couldn't be other than, and our opportunity in this lifetime is to recognize that, recognize what we have always been.